I always thought I had it all figured out. That was the life I had planned anyway. I was on the verge of marrying Charlotte, the woman I'd spent the better part of a decade with. She was more than just my fiancé. She was my best friend, the person I thought I'd grow old with. Hell, I even imagined us running a little vineyard someday, laughing over glasses of our own wine as we'd sit on a porch somewhere away from the noise. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. You know how they say you see everything clearly in the rearview mirror? Well, I didn't see it then. Not when my brother Luke walked into that room. Not when I thought we were just two guys working on some business plans and catching up. He was my younger brother after all. I was the one who always looked out for him, taught him how to drive, how to land a job, how to tie a tie. He'd been my shadow for so long, I couldn't imagine anything else. But that was before he took her. Before he took Charlotte, the woman who said she'd never leave me, the woman who promised me forever. That was the day everything shattered. It was a Thursday early spring, if I remember correctly. The sky was grey, typical for the city, and I'd just come home from a meeting when I walked through the front door. I thought I heard laughter from the living room, but the laughter wasn't mine. It wasn't hers either. My heart froze in my chest as I stepped further in, and then I saw them. They were sitting there side by side, too comfortable, too close. And then he kissed her, right in front of me. Luke, my own brother. I couldn't even move. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened like I was being smothered. All I could do was watch them, watch my family break apart in front of my eyes. I don't know how long I stood there, just frozen, staring at the two of them, her face flushed, his arm draped casually around her shoulders, like it belonged there. It wasn't until Charlotte caught my eye that I finally snapped out of it. She looked at me, but I didn't see the apology in her eyes. No regret, not even shame. Just a hollowed-out look that screamed, "This is what you deserve." I turned, walked out, and slammed the door behind me. I never wanted to look back. It wasn't just the betrayal that cut through me. It was the indifference. Both of them together didn't even try to stop me. It was as if I had no right to be angry, no right to question them. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything, didn't even ask why. I just left. I didn't care to know the truth. Maybe because I already knew it. Or maybe because I didn't want to face what it would do to me. Instead, I packed my things and disappeared from the life I knew. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even leave a note. For 6 months, I didn't hear from either of them. Not a call. Not a text. Nothing. It was as if I never existed. But then life has a funny way of pulling you back into things you never thought you'd deal with again. It was a few weeks ago when I got that call. A lawyer telling me that my mother had passed. I didn't want to go. Hell, I'd almost convinced myself that I could ignore the whole thing. But the guilt gnawed at me. I couldn't just let it go. She was still my mother after all. So I put on a suit and got on the next flight home. And there they were, standing in the middle of a crowd at the church. Charlotte, the same Charlotte. Her smile flawless, her hair perfect, as if nothing had ever happened. And next to her, standing with his arm around her waist, was Luke. The same Luke who had destroyed my life. Only now, he wasn't just standing beside her as some misguided sibling. No, he was flaunting his conquest. He had her. He had everything I had once dreamed of. I stood there at the back of the church, feeling the weight of everything, my anger, my loss, my disbelief. He looked at me, and I saw that smugness I'd come to hate, that same arrogance that had always been his. He knew it too. He knew I hadn't moved on. He knew that I had been the one left behind. "Still alone, huh?" Luke said, smirking as he glanced over at me. His voice was thick with condescension. "I've got the woman, the money, the house. What do you have?" The words hung in the air, suffocating. I didn't say anything at first. What was there to say I'd spent the past 6 months trying to build myself back up? But that wasn't the answer he was looking for. Instead, I smiled. It was calm, almost too calm. The kind of smile you give when you've accepted that you've already won. "Have you met my wife yet?" I asked. The words landed heavily between us, and then I turned. I beckoned her forward. From the corner of my eye, I saw their faces shift. Charlotte's eyes widened, and Luke's smile faltered. Stepping out of the crowd, Sarah appeared, my wife, my partner. She didn't belong in the same world as Luke and Charlotte, and they both knew it. This wasn't a woman who came with expensive tastes or polished words. This was Sarah, quiet, strong, the kind of woman who had supported me from the ground up. She was the one who believed in me when I had nothing left, the one who helped me see that I could rise again, no matter how far I'd fallen. Luke's eyes went wide. The smug grin disappeared, replaced by confusion. And that's when I knew. They had no idea what was coming next, because I wasn't done yet. You know they say time heals all wounds, but it doesn't. At least not in the way you think it will. You don't just wake up one morning and feel better. You wake up with a heavy chest, haunted by the memory of your own failure, wondering how the hell you got here. I spent the first couple of months after everything just existing. I had no direction, no purpose. I moved out of New York, left the life I'd built behind. I didn't want to see their faces or hear their names. Every reminder of Charlotte, of Luke, felt like a knife twisting in my gut. So I left. I packed my things, hitched a ride to nowhere, and ended up in a small town on the outskirts of nowhere. That's where I started over. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't anything anyone would look at and think, wow, he's really got it all together. I didn't have the fancy penthouse apartment anymore, didn't even have a car for a while. What I had was a tiny apartment above a bar, a place that smelled like stale beer and the weight of broken dreams. And yet it was the first time in years I could breathe without feeling the pressure of expectations. I found work at a local tech startup, doing menial tasks that felt too small for someone who once managed multi-million-dollar projects. But it was enough. It was a chance to build something real without the looming shadow of my past hanging over me. And while I was busy setting up networks and troubleshooting software, the anger I'd buried began to surface. Slowly, at first. Then one day it hit me this was my second chance. I wasn't going to go back to the life I had. I wasn't going to crawl back into that hole of betrayal and shame. What I was going to do was better. Smarter. I was going to make something out of the broken pieces I had left. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about showing everyone, including myself, that I could succeed without needing anyone's approval. I started putting plans in motion. Little by little, I began learning what I needed to know, not just about tech, but about business, the kind of business that didn't rely on connections or wealth or family ties. It relied on grit, on building relationships with people who actually cared about what you were doing, people who believed in your potential. I met Sarah soon after I moved into that rundown apartment. She was the one who showed me that I could still make a name for myself, even in this small town. I wasn't the first person to give up on life after a heartbreak, and I wouldn't be the last. But Sarah had this way of making you feel like you weren't the problem. Like the world didn't owe you anything, but that didn't mean you were worthless. She was smart, brilliant, actually. She had worked for some of the big names in tech before getting burned out. She and I clicked right from the start. Not because of some grand romantic gesture, but because we were both drowning in the same sea of disappointment. Together, we started building things. Small projects, at first nothing flashy, but we were building brick by brick. It felt like something I hadn't experienced in a long time purpose. I wanted to show her that I wasn't broken, that I could offer something more than a broken heart and a shattered ego. But it wasn't just the work. It was the way Sarah made me feel like I was enough, like I wasn't the sum of my failures, like I could rise from the ashes of what was left behind. She gave me a reason to believe in myself again, to fight for something that wasn't rooted in revenge or proving someone else wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could build something from the ground up, no connections, no favors, just hard work, and the belief that I deserved more than what had been handed to me. It wasn't easy, though. No, it was far from it. I learned what it meant to be patient, to grind, to stay up late when everyone else was sleeping, to put in the hours without ever seeing instant results. And there were times when I wanted to quit, when the world seemed like it was just waiting for me to fail. I thought about New York, about Charlotte, about Luke, about the life I had once envisioned. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered that night. That night, when Luke, with his smug grin, looked at me and told me I had nothing left. And I remembered the hollow look on Charlotte's face, the way she had let me walk away without a single word of apology. That was enough to fuel me. I didn't need them. I didn't need the mansion or the fancy clothes. I needed me, and as hard as it was to admit, that was something I had lost in the rush to prove myself to everyone else. Now, I was rebuilding. Not just my career, but my life. I was slowly becoming the person I always should have been. Sarah and I weren't just partners in business. We were becoming something more. Not in the way I had once dreamed of with Charlotte, but in a way that felt real, genuine, no pretenses. And every day as I watched our little startup grow, I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was worth more than the story they had told about me. Soon, my company was no longer just surviving, it was thriving. And I knew it was only a matter of time before the people who had abandoned me would see it too. It was a typical early fall afternoon when the phone call came. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the name on the screen, Luke. For the past few years, I'd avoided hearing from him like the plague. But there it was, a number I couldn't ignore. I hesitated, a mix of curiosity and dread building up inside me. What the hell did he want now? Was he really that brazen? I picked up. "Hey, Matt. It's Luke." His voice was oddly calm, too calm. The kind of calm you have when you're about to say something that will knock the wind out of someone. "What's up?" I tried to sound casual, but the tightness in my chest betrayed me. I already knew something was coming, something I wouldn't like. "I just wanted to tell you that Mom passed away." His voice softened, but I could hear the undercurrent of discomfort like he was walking on eggshells. "The funeral's next week. I thought you should know." For a moment, I just stood there silent. I hadn't spoken to Mom in over a year, not since everything had happened. She was always the one who tried to play peacemaker between me and Luke. But after everything that went down with Charlotte, I couldn't bring myself to even pick up the phone. It felt like too much of a betrayal to face her, too much of a reminder that my family was gone. "Yeah, okay, I'll be there." My voice was flat, emotionless. "Good." He sounded relieved, like he thought this would somehow fix everything, like this was his way of making things right. We hung up, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of guilt creep up on me, not for not calling my mother, but for what was still lingering between me and everyone I'd left behind. But that's how this life works, right? You let the ghosts of your past drag you down for long enough, and eventually they'll show up when you least expect it. The funeral day arrived faster than I wanted it to. I wasn't prepared for the storm that was about to hit. I stood in the back of the church, looking at the sea of faces. People I barely knew. People who were only here out of obligation, out of family duty. The place smelled like a mix of lavender and old wood, the kind of scent that seemed to suffocate you, suffuse your thoughts with heaviness. And then I saw them. Luke and Charlotte standing in the front row, arm in arm. She was wearing a black dress that looked more like something you'd wear to a gala than a funeral. Her smile, perfect as always, didn't match the somberness of the occasion, but I wasn't surprised. This was Charlotte. She always wore her mask. Luke, the man who had torn my world apart, stood there with his chest puffed out like he'd won some great victory. But it was his eyes that gave him away. There was a flicker of guilt there, but it was quickly masked by that same arrogant smirk I'd come to despise, the same one that had been so casual when he'd kissed Charlotte in front of me, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't take it anymore. The anger bubbled up from somewhere deep inside of me, pushing against the walls I'd so carefully built. It was a slow burn at first. I could feel my pulse quicken, my hands clenched at my sides, but I stayed still. I was done reacting in the same old ways. No, this time it was going to be different. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and forced myself to remember what I'd built. And that's when I heard it. The voice. "Hey, Matt," a soft voice behind me. I turned, and there she was. Sarah, my partner, my wife. She was wearing a simple, elegant black dress, her dark hair pulled back into a neat bun. She was standing a few feet behind me, not in the spotlight, just there, quietly supporting me. "Sarah," I said, unable to keep the relief from my voice. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone. I didn't expect you to be here. "Of course I'm here," she said, her voice steady and calm. "You think I'd let you do this alone?" I smiled faintly, the knot in my chest loosening just a little. Then the air shifted. I saw Luke turn and catch a glimpse of Sarah. His eyes widened just slightly, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of confusion on his face. He wasn't expecting this. He wasn't prepared for the fact that I wasn't the broken man he remembered. I turned to Sarah and nodded. She understood without a word. With that single movement, I felt the tide turn. I walked slowly toward the front of the room, Sarah beside me. The murmurs of the guests grew louder as we passed. The quiet whispers about who I was, where I'd been, why I hadn't spoken to my family for years, they didn't matter anymore. They weren't part of my life. The past didn't control me anymore. I was in control now. We reached the front row, where Luke and Charlotte sat, frozen, staring at us. Charlotte tried to hide it, but the way her eyes flickered with recognition, with dread, told me everything I needed to know. She was not prepared for this. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Then I turned to Luke, keeping my voice calm, steady. I had no intention of raising it. I didn't need to. "Luke," I said, my voice even almost too calm. "I'm glad you came today. You see, I've been doing well. I've built something. And I'd like you to meet my wife." I turned, motioning to Sarah, and that was the moment everything changed. As Sarah stepped forward, her presence filling the room like a quiet storm, Luke's confident mask slipped. His jaw tightened. I saw it recognition. The moment he realized who she was, he tried to hide it, but it was too late. "Sarah," I said, my eyes on Luke's now as I addressed my wife. "This is my brother Luke." And this, I turned to Charlotte, who looked like she might fall out of her seat at any moment. This is the woman who once thought I had nothing to offer. It was over. The look on Luke's face said it all. He thought he had won. But he was about to learn what real success looked like. The silence in the room stretched as Sarah and I stood there side by side, letting the weight of the moment settle. Luke and Charlotte were still frozen in shock, their masks slipping, their carefully constructed world falling apart in front of them. I could see the thoughts racing behind Luke's eyes. He was trying to figure out how this happened, how I, the one he thought he had destroyed, was standing here poised and calm with everything he'd once taken from me. And then some. What the hell is going on here, Matt? Luke finally broke the silence, his voice cracking with disbelief. You really had to drag us into this, didn't you? He laughed, but it wasn't genuine. It was a desperate attempt to regain some control. I didn't flinch. I didn't even look away. Instead, I turned toward him slowly, my gaze steady. No, Luke. I said, my voice calm but firm. I didn't drag you into anything. You brought this on yourself. Remember that. His face hardened, but there was something else underneath it. Fear. Fear that maybe he had underestimated me. He hadn't just underestimated me, though. He had underestimated what I could become. Charlotte opened her mouth to speak, but her words died when she saw Sarah standing beside me. She didn't know how to react. This wasn't the reaction she'd been expecting. In her world, I was supposed to be the weak one, the one who couldn't handle what they'd done to me, but that wasn't who I was anymore. You don't get to play the victim here, Matt. Luke spat, his anger bubbling over. You left. You walked away from your family. From us. You left me to pick up the pieces to fix everything. And now you come back here acting like the damn hero. It was like a slap in the face, but it didn't faze me. He thought I left because I couldn't handle it. He thought I left because I was too weak. He didn't know that I left because I needed to rebuild, to find out who I really was without all the weight of his manipulation and Charlotte's shallow love dragging me down. I took a deep breath and looked him in the eye. You never once thought about why I left, did you? You only cared about your own damn ego, Luke. You think I walked away because I couldn't face the truth. The truth is, I walked away because I had nothing left to prove to you, or to her. I motioned to Charlotte, whose face had gone pale. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, not knowing how to handle the truth that was suddenly pouring out. You want to know what happened after I left? I continued, my voice steady. I started over. I built something real. And I did it without either of you. Luke's jaw clenched, and Charlotte's eyes shifted nervously. The tension in the room was palpable, like they both knew their empire was built on a lie. They thought they had taken everything from me, my fiancé, my family, my life. But they had no idea how much I had grown, how much I had become. You took everything from me. Matt. Luke said, his voice shaking now, betraying his anger with a hint of vulnerability I hadn't expected. You left me with nothing. I shook my head, my eyes softening just a fraction. No, Luke. You took from yourself, and now you're about to see what that really costs. Sarah stepped forward, her quiet confidence filling the space. She wasn't the woman Luke and Charlotte had expected. She wasn't some fragile thing that needed protecting. No, Sarah was the one who helped me rebuild, helped me. Her wisdom, her drive, and her belief in what we were building together had been the foundation I'd needed. You thought I was just another rebound, didn't you? Charlotte finally spoke, her voice shaky, trying to regain some control. You thought you could just walk away and forget everything we had. You think this, she said, motioning to Sarah, is something real. It's just another consolation. I could hear the bitterness in her voice, but it didn't faze me anymore. She wasn't who I had thought she was. The woman I had loved had been nothing more than an illusion, a fantasy. I had been living in the shadows of their manipulation, but now I was standing in the light. You're wrong, Charlotte, I said softly but firmly. This isn't a consolation. This is my life, and it's more than anything you ever gave me. I turned to Sarah, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the life we'd built together, the life we were going to keep building. And that's something you'll never have. The words hung in the air. Charlotte's face fell, and I saw the realization hit her. She had never been able to keep me, not really. She had wanted control. She had wanted the illusion of power. But the truth was, she had always been playing a part. And now, everything she had worked for was crumbling. Luke, on the other hand, was quiet. His eyes flickered to Charlotte, then back to me, but I could see the cracks in his confidence, the cracks in his mask. I wasn't just someone he could brush aside anymore. I had become something he couldn't ignore. He had to face the reality of what he had done. He wasn't the hero in this story anymore. "You really think you've won, don't you?" Luke said, his voice low, almost defeated. I let out a long breath, feeling the weight of everything that had led me to this moment. "I don't think I've won. I know I have." And with that, I turned my back on them, on the family I used to know. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about showing them how much better I had become. It was about walking away from the past, once and for all. It was about setting myself free. As I left the church, Sarah's hand found mine, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running away from anything. I was walking toward something, toward the life we had built, toward everything I had worked for. The past was behind me now, and nothing, not even Luke and Charlotte, could take that away. The funeral was over. The crowd dispersed, the mourners all slipping back into their own lives, pretending like nothing had changed. But something had changed. Everything had changed. I stood outside the church, the cold air biting at my skin, but it felt good, like it was washing away the remnants of everything I'd left behind. The guilt, the anger, the sense of inadequacy. All of it felt like it was dissolving in the wind, carried off into the distance. I glanced at Sarah, her hand still wrapped around mine, her quiet presence grounding me. Her calmness had always been a contrast to my chaos, and now I was finally starting to see how much I needed that peace, how much I'd craved it, even in the most turbulent moments of my life. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. She had this way of cutting through the noise of my thoughts, like she always knew when I needed a moment to breathe. I nodded, my lips curling into a faint smile. "Yeah, I'm okay." It wasn't just okay. It was more than that. It was freedom. The truth was, I had been running for so long, constantly trying to outrun my past, to escape the shame that came with being betrayed, not just by Luke and Charlotte, but by my own expectations of what my life was supposed to be. I'd tied my self-worth to them, to that relationship, to the life I thought I deserved. And when it all crumbled, I'd thought I was nothing. But here I was, standing on the other side of it, still whole, still standing tall. I had rebuilt my life not out of spite, but out of necessity. I didn't need them anymore. And for the first time, I could look at myself in the mirror and see someone worthy, not because of anything they had taken from me, but because of everything I had built by myself. The next few weeks passed in a blur. News of Luke's financial scandal hit the media hard. His investors pulled out. His company was left floundering. People started asking questions, and the answers weren't pretty. I didn't have to lift a finger. The weight of his lies was finally catching up with him. His arrogance, his sense of entitlement, they'd been his downfall. And Charlotte, well, her career was on the rocks too. Her connection to Luke's fraudulent dealings was enough to destroy the facade she'd spent years building. I never contacted them again. Not once. The power in walking away, realizing I didn't need to engage with their mess, was more liberating than I could have imagined. I didn't need to win in the way I had once thought. The real victory wasn't in watching them fall, but in knowing that I had grown into someone capable of standing on my own without relying on anyone's validation. One night, as I sat across from Sarah at our kitchen table, a glass of wine between us, I realized something, a thought that had been quietly working its way through my mind for weeks. I thought I was supposed to hate them. The words came out before I could stop them. Sarah raised an eyebrow, a soft smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You don't anymore." I paused the question, lingering in the air for a moment. "No, not really." I let out a breath, feeling lighter, just saying the words out loud. "It's not hate. It's more like indifference. I don't have to hate them to know they'll never be part of my life again. And I'm okay with that. I'm better than okay." Sarah's hand reached across the table, her fingers brushing against mine. Her touch grounded me like it always did. "I'm proud of you." I didn't need her to say it, but hearing it still meant the world. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't a victim. I had reclaimed my life not through a dramatic confrontation, but through the quiet, steady process of living on my own terms. It wasn't just about building a business or making money, though that part had been fulfilling in its own right. It was about building a future with someone who saw me for who I truly was not, for my past mistakes, not for the things I couldn't control, but for the man I had become. Months later, I received a letter. It was from Luke. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but the words inside caught me off guard. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. Not exactly. Instead, he was acknowledging what I had built, what he had failed to see in me all those years ago. He admitted in his own way that I had been right, that walking away had been the best thing I could have done for myself. He'd lost everything, his company, his reputation, his family, and I had gained everything. For a moment, I stared at the letter, the ink smudged slightly where his hand had trembled as he wrote. I folded it carefully, set it aside, and walked over to the fire. I didn't need the letter. I didn't need his apology. What I needed was what I had now. Sarah, a life I had built on my own terms, and the peace that came with knowing I had done it without them. We'd come so far, Sarah and I, and we still had a long way to go. "What's next?" Sarah asked, a soft curiosity in her voice as she sipped her wine. "Next," I repeated, looking out the window at the city skyline. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to happen. I wasn't rushing towards some goal. I was here in this moment, building something real and lasting. Next, we just keep going. And I knew that no matter what came next, I'd be ready. Because now I wasn't running from anything. I was walking toward everything I had fought for. It had been nearly 6 months since the funeral, and life had settled into a rhythm I never imagined possible. The business was flourishing bigger than I'd ever thought it would be. My nights were filled with late meetings and strategies, and my days were spent with Sarah by my side, sharing quiet moments of triumph and peace. I didn't need anything more than this. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. But then, out of nowhere, the phone rang. I recognized the number before I even picked up. It was a number I'd avoided for years, the one that had haunted my thoughts in the darkest of times. Luke. For a second, I just stood there staring at the screen. My hand hovered over the phone, unsure whether I should answer. Sarah, noticing the hesitation, glanced up from her paperwork. "Is it him?" she asked quietly. I nodded, my jaw clenched. What does he want? I could feel the years of anger, frustration, and betrayal rising up in my chest, just waiting to burst. But I knew better. I had learned better. My life had been filled with chaos long enough. I wasn't about to let him pull me back into that mess. I took a deep breath and answered. "Luke," I said, keeping my voice steady, calm, too calm. "What do you want?" There was a pause on the other end, and then he spoke, his voice low and weary. "Matt, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need to say something." I closed my eyes, resisting the urge to hang up. I knew this was coming. The phone call I'd dreaded for so long, the moment he'd finally broken down and realized what he had done, what he had lost. "Go ahead," I said, forcing the words out. "I'm listening." I've lost everything, Matt. My company, my reputation, Charlotte even. She's gone. I don't know how to fix it. His voice cracked, and I could hear the rawness in his words. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm not asking for anything really, but I want you to know something. You were right. I destroyed everything. I never saw it until it was too late." I let his words hang in the air for a moment. It wasn't what I expected. But then again, what was I expecting? For him to beg me to come back into his life, to fix what he had broken, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hold on to the anger, to use it as a weapon. But the other part of me, the part that had learned to let go of everything that had weighed me down, knew that I didn't need to carry this anymore. "I'm sorry." Luke continued, his voice small now. "I didn't realize what I was doing to you. I thought you'd be fine. I thought you'd just get over it." The irony of it hit me then. He thought I would be the one who would just walk away and forget about the betrayal. He had no idea what real strength looked like. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the conversation starting to settle in. "Luke," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You've already done the hardest thing you could do. You've admitted it. You've owned up to it. And is that enough?" he asked almost desperately. "No, it's not enough," I said, not hesitating. "But it's a start. It's the only thing you can control now. You've lost everything because of your own actions. And I've moved on because of mine. I've built something real without you, without Charlotte. And I don't need to go back to that place. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done." I could hear him on the other end of the line, breathing heavily, processing the weight of my words. The silence stretched out. For a moment, I thought he might hang up. Maybe he would expect me to offer him something, some kind of lifeline. But I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to be the one to pull him out of his mess anymore. I had done that. I had spent enough time trying to fix everyone else. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself for what I did. Luke finally said, his voice quieter now. "But I can live with that. I just wanted you to know. I know." I answered, my voice softer than it had been when the conversation started. "And that's all you can do." The call ended shortly after that, but it didn't feel like a closure I had been expecting. It was quieter than that. There were no grand gestures, no last-minute redemption. Just a man finally facing his mistakes, acknowledging them, and realizing he couldn't undo them. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. I didn't need his forgiveness. I didn't need anyone's validation. I didn't need to hear him beg for redemption. I had already found it. In myself. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked as I set the phone down. I looked at her, a quiet smile spreading across my face. "Yeah, everything's fine." But it wasn't just fine. It was better than fine. It was peace. It was knowing that I didn't need the past to dictate my future, that I had the strength to build something new, and that I was the one who had control over my own happiness. "What's next?" Sarah asked, her eyes sparkling with that same quiet confidence she had shown me all these years. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Next." I repeated, my voice steady with certainty. "Next. We just keep moving forward. Together." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was carrying any weight. I wasn't running anymore. I was walking into the future with a purpose. Not to get back at anyone, but to build a life that was all my own. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had already won. A few months had passed since the phone call. The chaos that had once ruled my life had calmed, and everything had fallen into a quiet rhythm I never thought I would find. It was a slow burn, a steady hum of satisfaction and peace that kept me grounded. My business was expanding. Sarah and I had built something incredible together, brick by brick, and every day felt like a step towards something more. But in the quiet, I still found myself looking back sometimes with fondness, sometimes with regret, but mostly with gratitude. I wasn't the man I once was. I wasn't the person who let others define him, who crumbled under betrayal. No. I had become something stronger, something I could be proud of, and in those moments of reflection, I realized how much I owed to the people who had stayed by my side. Sarah had never wavered. She had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. That was the greatest gift I could have ever received. One evening, I was sitting at my desk working late as usual when Sarah came in with 2 glasses of wine in her hands. She didn't say anything at first. She didn't need to. She just handed me the glass, and I took it, letting the warm feeling of the wine fill me up for a moment. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" Sarah said softly, sitting across from me, her eyes watching me with that same steady gaze that always made me feel like everything would be okay. "What's been a while?" I asked, my voice sounding tired, though not from exhaustion, from something deeper, from the weight of everything I had carried for so long. "Since we've really talked about everything, about what happened with Luke, and how far you've come." Her voice was gentle, but her words struck me with an intensity I hadn't expected. I set the glass down my fingers, tracing the rim slowly. The truth was, I hadn't really thought about Luke much lately. I had let go. The phone call, the letter he had sent it, was all part of the past. But Sarah was right. It was time. It was time to finally put that chapter to rest, once and for all. "You've been quiet about it." Sarah continued, her voice still calm, as though she was giving me the space to feel what I needed to feel. "I think maybe you need to say it out loud, to really let go." I looked up at her, the weight of everything suddenly crashing into me. I hadn't realized how much I had buried inside. But this wasn't about Luke anymore. This was about me, about what I had become, and the person I wanted to continue being. "I've thought about it a lot, you know. What happened with Luke? With Charlotte?" I paused, my words heavy. I used to think I needed their forgiveness. I used to think that would be the thing that made everything right. But the truth is, I never needed it. I never needed them to make me whole. I looked out the window, the city lights sparkling in the distance, and I smiled softly. This was my victory. I needed to forgive myself. The words felt like they were breaking free for the first time. I needed to stop holding on to the idea that I wasn't enough, that their betrayal defined me. I've let that go. I've learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back. It's just letting go, letting the past stay where it belongs. Sarah nodded, her eyes soft, but knowing. "I've always believed in you," she said quietly. "Even when you couldn't see it. You've become everything I knew you could be. Not because of anything anyone else did or didn't do, but because you decided to take control of your own life." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "Thank you." I said the words simple, but full of everything I couldn't say in the past. For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. There was a moment of silence between us, quiet, peaceful, and comforting. I realized for the first time in my life that this was enough. I didn't need the drama, the chaos, or the validation from others. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, especially not to Luke or Charlotte. I had built something real, something strong. And it wasn't about being the hero in anyone's eyes. It was about being at peace with who I had become. Later that evening, as I sat on the balcony with Sarah, the quiet hum of the city beneath us, I thought about everything that had brought me to this point. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the months of rebuilding. It wasn't easy, and it hadn't always been clear, but it had been worth it, because now I understood something that had eluded me for so long. True success isn't about outshining others, it's about outshining your own doubts. It's about building something that's real that no one can take from you. And so as I looked out at the skyline, I felt the weight of the years behind me, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like the past was a distant memory, a place I could visit, but never stay. I had moved forward, and now I was free. To new beginnings, I said, raising my glass. To us? Sarah replied, her eyes meeting mine with that same quiet strength. And in that moment, I knew we would face whatever came next together, because we had already faced the hardest part, and we had come out stronger. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to share your thoughts and feelings in the comments. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose peace over vengeance? I'd love to hear your experiences. If you found this story meaningful, please hit like to show your support and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos that explore human nature growth and resilience. May we all find the courage to walk away from what no longer serves us and find peace after the turmoil.